Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, March 2nd, 2016, hump day, middle of the weekday, starting that long, slow glide down to Kaahumanu Friday. And boy, oh boy, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. Tom is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And I forgot to turn this little thing off over here. There's too many buttons to keep track of over here. All right. Obviously, yesterday was Super Tuesday. Major events happening. It's kind of interesting looking at the corporate media today kind of frothing and thrashing over what's going on here. Not too surprisingly, Donald Trump dominated Super Tuesday, won 6 states handily, and in the states he didn't win, it was very, very close, and so it was still picking up delegates. And huge embarrassment for Hillary Clinton. Now, she won, but not by the margin everybody was saying she was going to. Bernie Sanders won 4 states, Vermont, Colorado, Oklahoma, and Minnesota. He did far better than anybody in the corporate media was expecting him to do. Trump was doing well, and far from being the knockout that Hillary Clinton was predicting, it's still a race over there. So Trump is on his way to the nomination, barring the unforeseen or the unexpected. And he's out there saying, you know, once the primary is over and he is the GOP candidate, barring the unexpected, he's going after Hillary. And I want to see that happen, too. Now, what's really interesting is there was a huge GOP voter turnout yesterday. Far greater than the Democrats. There's a lack of enthusiasm among Democrats. They just didn't want to get on out there. But the Republicans were out there. They feel a chance to peacefully change the future course of this nation, and they took advantage of it. Needless to say, reports from all over about massive election fraud. Multiple radio stations in Texas were getting phone calls from people saying that their electronic voting machines kept switching their votes from Trump to Rubio. They were very upset about that. Ballots were missing. Ballots were being handed out already filled in. The wrong ballots were being handed out. It's just absolutely amazing. Voting irregularities is what they're calling it. It's time for somebody to say what it is. It's cheating. They're cheating the election. In fact, it's so bad. The foreign press is talking about it. The foreign press is laughing at the American election system. Now, one of the reasons the corporate media is in thrash mode is because they've been shown to have been wrong. They were wrong about Donald Trump when he started. They were wrong about Bernie Sanders. And they're out there saying, oh, well, we just didn't see it. We didn't grasp what was going on. Nonsense. The corporate media all saw Donald Trump's phenomenon. They're seeing Bernie Sanders' attraction to the public. Their assigned task was to kill Trump and Sanders. And they failed. And that's why they're upset today, because the corporate media is finally starting to realize they have lost the war for the minds of Americans. And if they cannot brainwash you into doing what their corporate sponsors want them to do, then those big fat paychecks are going to start drying up. And everyone's talking about Bernie Sanders. He lost technically, but he did so much better than was expected. And they're saying, it's still a race. It's still a race. Bernie's gaining and Hillary's in decline. And there is still a long way to go in the primary season. Now, there are accusations of election law violation up in Massachusetts because, as we reported yesterday, Bill Clinton was showing up at some of the polling stations, and in one case, he and his security retinue were in a position where it blocked access to the polling place for over an hour. And apparently they did that at least 4 different locations in areas of Massachusetts supporting Bernie Sanders. But under Massachusetts law, It's a crime to engage in vote solicitation within 150 feet of a polling station. And Bill Clinton was literally standing in front of the door saying, "I'm here to support my wife. You got to vote for my wife. I want to go back into that White House and recover all those hidden tapes I had about all my girlfriends." And of course, nobody's talking about that. But we're seeing articles all over the place like this one in RINF.com saying that Sanders could be poised to turn the tables on Hillary Clinton, barring the unforeseen. Bernie, you better stay out of small aircraft. What can I tell you here? Now, there's another little article. I had been taking Bernie Sanders to task for going gentle on the email scandal, not going to court over the videotaped evidence of election fraud that was caught on tape, Iowa and New Hampshire. But there's an article coming out here from Op-Ed News, which basically says that Bernie is trying to march the high moral road in the campaign. He doesn't want to fight dirty, doesn't want to play dirty, and this article is basically saying, Bernie, it's time to grow up and join the real world. You do have a chance to really make a significant dent in Hillary's numbers, if not take the nomination. But you got to get out there and you got to decide that's what you really want to do. And I'd like to see him do it. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Dustin, are you there? I am calling Dustin. Nope.
Hello, Mike?
Yeah. What? Yeah.
Hi, Mike.
Hi. Did you go for coffee?
Mittens Romney to the rescue. Not.
Oh, I can't believe they're out there talking about that. We're going to be talking about that a little bit further into the show.
Yeah, it's like they're really desperate to pull this dude out. I mean, didn't he used to work for a vulture capitalist company?
He was a vulture capitalist country. There's a documentary out there called When Mitt Romney Came to Town. This guy made his money going in, buying up companies, firing all the workers, and selling the assets. And that's what he did.
These are the kinds of people that they want in. That's why you saw that newspaper, was it the Daily News in the UK, saying, you better get your visas ready to flee America.
Yes.
Because Trump gets in. It's all a same group cabal. It's the Anglo-American Empire, bankerism, all this other group. That's why they're trying to scare people. If you vote for Trump, you better leave the country.
Oh, I mean, some of the things have been coming out with, it'll destroy national security. Trump has a Death Star. Trump is selling you out to Ming of Mongo, and all the rest of this nonsensical stuff. It really is. But something, they've reached the point where their hysteria is so extreme. Everybody's saying, wow, what is with these people? Are they on drugs over there to be saying this kind of stuff?
It's the same group of people who push for the wars, push for all these refugees coming into the countries. And look at in Greece, they're putting them in the Olympic stadiums, the refugees.
Yeah, it is. I mean, this globalism, New World Order plan is definitely stumbled badly. And but they're not going to quit. What can I tell you?
All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks. We're going to let you go. Now then, there are some people out there saying, before you get caught up in the election slogans and the ribbons and the parties and everything, you might want to seriously think, what's going to happen if Hillary Clinton actually succeeds in stealing the White House? Has Trump knocked off and walks into the White House? And there's an article over in Zero Hedge saying that Hillary Clinton is a bigger warmonger than Bush and Cheney. In fact, she's a bigger warmonger than Obama. That she was out there not only, laughing about Gaddafi's death and everything, but there's an article that came out of Blacklisted News. Some of the emails that have been released over the Benghazi disaster show that Hillary was the one cheering along going into Libya. We came, we saw, he died. Ah! Cackles like a witch. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Boy, the phone lines are loading up. People got things they want to talk about. Before we take phone calls, though, I do have to share this story with you. And I hate to say I told you so, but no, actually, I kind of enjoy it when I get to say I told you so. Story coming out of the Washington Times. A State Department spokesman announced yesterday, while we were all watching Super Tuesday, that the review of the Clinton secret emails may be delayed until after the November election. And then they go on to say that they're not going to be held to the political calendar. It's the political calendar that they're looking at. They're going to delay the rest of the classified emails until after the election, so Hillary has her chance to win the White House, and if she doesn't win, they'll release it, Obama will pardon her, and that will be the end of it. Because if I am right, and Hillary was selling secrets to foreign governments in exchange for donations to her charitable foundation, they're never going to let that out, because a scandal of that magnitude would destroy the government. That will not be allowed out into the history books for 75 years, like the inside stuff of the JFK assassination. All right, let's start grabbing some phone calls here. James in Ohio, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, did you see on Breitbart where William Kristol is basically laying out a plan to throw the election to Hillary to avoid Trump getting elected?
Yeah, isn't that amazing? The GOP are so afraid of Donald Trump, they're willing to give the White House to the Democrats.
Well, I think as bread and circuses are in short supply and jobs too, etc., I think a lot of people are seeing this the wrong way. Trump isn't our last chance, it's the elite's last chance. I think they should pay attention to what Huckabee said, because about, thank goodness it's a revolution with ballots, not bullets, because if they throw this election, or if Trump is playing us, I think very shortly after the election you're going to see it unharness a malevolence in the American people that will leave the elite absolutely no quarter. And that's all I have to say.
Well, you know, I understand and I agree there's a risk there. I'd like to avoid it. I do not want to see revolution in the streets of America, because all the wrong people get killed and crippled in such things. But you're absolutely right. I mean, we're seeing all these people talking about assassinating Trump. They're talking about bringing in Mitt Romney, and then at the convention literally telling the Republican voters, we're not going to listen to you. Your candidate is Mitt Romney, and if you are a loyal Republican, you will vote for him. And, of course, that's not going to happen.
Oh, one bright spot is that Ventura's talking about running if Sanders doesn't get the nomination for the Democratic, so you'll have him splitting the Democratic vote.
Okay. If he run, well, see, he has to run as an independent. See, the GOP convention can draw in Romney and anoint him as the candidate and put him on the general election ballot in all 50 states. But for Jesse Ventura, realistically, he's going to have to run as an independent. And that means he's going to have petition drives in all 50 states just to get on the ballot. And so, you know, I'm a big fan of Jesse Ventura. It's not really in the realm of possibility at this stage.
Well, okay. All right. That's all we got for you.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over here to Steve in California. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I'd like to discuss what Trump talked about, I guess, a week ago or so, that holding the media accountable for this defamation of character thing they continue to do, and there's no backlash. They can just pretty much say whatever they want, try to attach a label. It could be totally false off the record, and nothing ever comes out of it. I mean, just look at this whole KKK thing. That's ridiculous. I mean, if you want to do that, you could also go back to the Bush administration, where it shows Donald Rumsfeld shaking hands with Saddam Hussein and saying, well, he's on the side of the terrorists, and he was working with the terrorist organization. Yeah, you could say that. You can make that case, but, you know,
you could make a very strong case that Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton were working on the side of terrorists, and that's actually backed up by hard information. The problem with the corporate media is you cannot sue them for any statements they make unless you can prove intentional malice. You know, that's a loophole. As long as they can say, we didn't mean to be wrong, we didn't mean to hurt you, then they get off scot-free. Remember that landmark lawsuit arising out of Fox News and the Monsanto synthetic bovine growth hormone story, where these two, career top Fox reporters were assigned to do a story on this Monsanto growth hormone. They did the research and discovered there are serious health issues connected with it, which is not a surprise in this day and age, but back then Monsanto's public image was still very much intact. Fox News ordered the reporters to change the story, take out the negatives, and just make it a puff piece because Monsanto's a very good advertiser. The reporters refused on journalistic principles and were fired. The reporters sued Fox News for wrongful termination, and they lost on appeal when the judge pointed out there is no law that requires the corporate media to tell the truth to the public. And that means the owners of the corporate media can tell their correspondents and their prostitutes to lie to the public, and if the correspondents and the prostitutes refuse to lie, they can be legally fired, and that tells you all you need to know about the corporate media. But Trump is right. The media should be held to account. The reason the media was given that First Amendment by the Founding Fathers was to act as an objective, impartial observer of government wrongdoing, not be co-opted as the Ministry of Propaganda by that same government. And that's why the independent media is doing so well right now, is people understand the corporate media is just there to sell you new tax, a new policy, a new agenda, a new car, a new product, and a new president.
Yeah, basically just a megaphone from the White House. There's no alternative. They're just going to spout what they're told to spout. You know, one last comment on the Rubio comment with about Trump and the small hands. I said, what a no-class act, this guy. I mean, geez, with your history of what's going on with your float bubble parties and all that other stuff you've done, I mean, you got to laugh at somebody who makes...
Let he who was without chintz cast the first stone.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael.
All right, we're going to let you go here. All right, let's see. Mo in Florida, real quick, what's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Just a couple of things. I appreciate you taking my phone call. I don't know if you noticed last night, my wife and I were watching the Trump speech at Mar-a-Lago down here. It's not too far from us, actually. But did you see the look in Trump's eyes? And it almost looked like there was something wrong. And I don't know if he's had a death threat or...
Oh, I'm sure he has. I'm sure he has by now. I mean, we know he's wearing a bulletproof vest. We know he doesn't trust the Secret Service, and that's why he's got his own protective detail operating inside the ring of the Secret Service. Yeah, I can imagine that he's probably receiving death threats every other minute. All right, Mo, got to let you go. We'll be right back. Oh, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, as you know, on Monday there was another release of Hillary Clinton's emails in response to the subpoenas and the Freedom of Information Act and all these other investigations going on. And it may, tragically, potentially, answer the question of just how it was that the people who attacked the consulate in Benghazi knew that Ambassador Stevens was even there. Because it turns out there were regular emails going to and from Hillary Clinton on her private, unsecured server, carrying Ambassador Stevens' schedule, itinerary, where he was going to be, when he was going to be there. That's something for you all to be thinking about. Because do you want somebody who is that reckless with the nation's secrets, entrusted with more of the nation's secrets? That's really what it comes down to. And that's a point we've got to be making right now. Look how reckless Hillary Clinton was with the nation's secrets, which are your property. It's not her personal property. It's your property. Look how reckless she was. Do we want her to have access to even more of the secrets than she did as Secretary of State? What is she going to do with them? Sell them off to foreign governments in exchange for donations to her foundation. Now, Hillary is trying to position herself as supporting women's right to choose and control over their own body, but Hillary is on board the agenda to take away women's rights to refuse mandatory vaccinations that potentially damage your children. So she's all in favor of women's rights and freedom when she's on the campaign trail. And then when she's actually out there doing business, completely something else. Now, Rubio took a little bit of a clubbing in yesterday's primaries. Got to be feeling like a baby seal right about now. and complicating his life right now. And this has got nothing to do with his being in a gay bar or something when he was a kid. Who cares about that stuff? This is coming out of the politicalinsider.com. And yesterday we mentioned this scandal that had surfaced where Rubio, when he was in the Florida legislature, pulled some strings to get his brother-in-law a real estate license without mentioning first that it was his brother-in-law and second that his brother-in-law had a past history of being a cocaine dealer. Well, apparently the investigation is starting to grow, and they're starting to look at a lot of the things that were going on in the Florida state legislature. Now, one of Rubio's best friends and closest political supporters is Congressman David Rivera, who is currently under investigation by the FBI. And apparently they have found ties to shady deals, including a $100,000 bribe from a gambling executive and a secret transfer of $1 million from the corrupt dog track betting industry. These donations resulted in Rivera and Rubio's votes in favor of these well-connected families who wanted to maintain control over gambling rights. But apparently what surfaced now is Rubio received massive contributions from a criminal who is now in prison for helping to launder drug money from South America. Now remember that photo we keep putting on up of First Lady Hillary Clinton in front of the White House Christmas tree with known cocaine smuggler Jorge Cabrera? And he got to get into the White House and get his picture taken with the First Lady because he was a Clinton donor. I've never dealt drugs in my life. They're not going to let me into the White House. Not unless I write a really big check. Then it's open season here. Ben Carson has now officially quit the presidential race. Says there's no path forward. And he's going to go over to Egypt and open a tourism industry showing them the grain storage pyramids over there by the River Nile. Going to take a phone call here. Francis in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I want to draw your attention to something on Twitter. In fact, I tweeted it to your Twitter feed last night. There's a Twitter submitter called Eric Roper, R-O-P-E-R.
Yeah.
And he took a whole bunch of photos of the Minnesota caucuses last night, and it looks like Rubio won in Minnesota by tricking in zillions of Somalis. And the whole gymnasium, he's got video and he's got still photos. The whole gymnasium is nothing but Somalis. They're wearing the full niqab, full chador, and they're probably not even like legal immigrants or anything. He's a cheater, he's a liar, and he's a scumbag, and probably Sheldon Adelson paid them, $50 each or something to come in and do it. Eric Roper on Twitter.
Can you email me that? Because I have to be very honest. I'll post to Twitter. I don't read my Twitter feed very often. But if you could email me the pointer to that, I will definitely get it up on WhatReallyHappened.com.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Like I said earlier, this election is so crooked, they're having to screw those ballots into the ballot boxes. It really, it's amazing. We have to go out, and if we really want Donald Trump in the White House, we're going to have to support, not just to win the election, but to overwhelm all the vote riggers that are out there trying to drag him down. Now, here's an article that came out of Wall Street Journal, no less, and it hits the nail on the head. After Super Tuesday, the Republicans face the moment of truth. And it's talking about how all these heavyweights in the GOP party leadership who wanted Trump out, now they're looking at a tough choice. And that choice is, are they going to rally behind a very popular candidate who can take the White House, or are they willing to literally hand the White House to Hillary Clinton to keep Trump out? That's the choice. Now, as that caller mentioned earlier in the show, all of a sudden Mitt Romney is making noises. And apparently he's going to be having an address to the presidential campaign later today. Actually tomorrow. And they're out there saying that, Mitt Romney's going to ride in to save the day because, Trump will lose the general election. Trump can't possibly win the general election. We need, one of our other candidates in there. And Donald Trump is tarnishing the party's brand. Actually, no, the GOP doesn't need Trump to tarnish the brand. The GOP party leadership, their treatment of Trump, their treatment of Ron Paul, their disdain for the desires of their own Republican voters has tarnished the brand. And can you get your head around this excuse they're making? The GOP candidate who is just absolutely running away from all other GOP candidates, they're saying he can't win the White House, but one of these other single-digit candidates can? It's nonsense. But at this point, it looks like their next plan is to try and deny Trump enough delegates to lock in the nomination and throw this onto a brokered convention in which the party leadership will say to all you Republican voters, shut up and sit down, write some checks to us, we'll get back to you. And they will kick Trump out, and they'll put Mitt Romney in. And Hillary Clinton will win the White House. So that's where we are. The Republicans are going to use the brokered convention exactly the same way the Democrats are using the superdelegates to tell you it is none of your business who the candidates are. We will pick the candidates, and you sort of get to pretend that you choose among them. That's our current democracy here. We ran a poll for Republicans only on my website. Will you support Trump or will you give the White House to Hillary Clinton? 96% said they will support Donald Trump. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I'm just now putting up that story where Bill Kristol's out there saying that he is perfectly willing to give the White House to Hillary Clinton to keep Donald Trump out of there. Trump shouldn't win. You know what's really kind of amazing? Is every one of these people seems to have forgotten that this nation is founded on a principle of one person, one vote. Nobody is supposed to get up there and say, we will decide what candidates, we will decide who's best for the country. You don't get to do that and still call yourself an American. You just don't. And I'm seeing the editorial cartoonists are still trying to make a big deal about Donald Trump and the KKK. Now, even Fox News has backed off and said that David Duke saying he's going to vote for Trump doesn't really constitute an endorsement. David Duke did not come out and say, I endorse Trump for President of the United States of America. He just said, I'm going to vote for the guy. And they're still trying to make a big deal out of the fact that Donald Trump's father was arrested at a KKK riot. But if you read the original news coverage, it doesn't say that Fred was himself a member of the KKK, just he got caught in the riot. And he was arrested and released without charge. 19 years before Donald Trump was born. Can you see how terrified they are of this guy? Which is why I'm for him. Don't agree with everything that he says. In fact, there's a lot that Trump has said I don't agree with. But the fact that he is so hated by Wall Street, the corporate media, that's good enough for me. That's our best option moving forward. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Glenn in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I think your concerns about Romney's background as an asset stripper are unfounded because America's assets have already been stripped. There's nothing there,
Well, his background as an asset stripper shows what his moral character is like and how and his complete disdain for ordinary working Americans. And we need somebody who's really going to put Americans back to work, not illegal immigrants from south of the border, not refugees from the American war zones. We need a president who's going to put America back to work, who's going to revive our manufacturing, who's going to get us back to being a producer of healthy, natural, organic produce that the rest of the world wants to buy. And
so you're saying we need someone who's going to make America great again? No, just kidding.
Yeah, okay.
Another thing about Romney, one scenario was they could bring him in to scoop up straggling delegates as the others drop out, and then force him upon Trump as a running mate, much as they did HW with Reagan.
The problem is, okay, Romney has already missed the deadline to be on the state ballots for pretty much all the rest of the primaries and caucuses. He can still file the paperwork to be a presidential candidate, okay, but he can't get on the remaining state ballots. Most of those have already gone to the printers.
Huh. So he would have to be like a write-in?
Well, if you're okay with cleaning all that white off the computer screen, sure. But no, what they're planning on doing is bringing him in a brokered convention.
Oh, yeah, okay. So, well, what if they brokered? Okay, now in the brokering, do they name both the president and the vice president?
Probably.
Okay, so then if Trump was winning by such a landslide that if they scuttled him, it would create actual volatility and put them at risk of actual, revolution, they might consent to go ahead and put Trump in, but then attach Romney on there as his running mate and then use Romney as, puppet strings.
That's one possibility, although I can't see Romney agreeing to take the second seat. But again, if Trump picks up enough delegates to lock in the nomination, then there isn't really a thing the party leadership can do under the rules. Now, obviously, at this point, they're willing to bend and break the rules. And, at this point, I can understand why Donald Trump is going to be concerned for his safety. He's wise enough to understand that the current entrenched power elite are perfectly willing to kill him to keep him out of power. Same thing they did to Robert Kennedy.
That may not be necessary. Trump may have body armor, but don't forget, Romney has secret magic underwear.
Well, they could always get Hillary Clinton's Benghazi overcoat, not Benghazi, the place where she claimed she was under sniper fire, and the video showed that she was just walking around just normal and natural. Anyway, listen, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to take Tim in California. Aloha, Tim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I was calling about something that happened this morning, actually. I had the misfortune of being in a restaurant and sitting next to a TV that had The View, the morning show The View on.
Oh, how could you even eat?
Oh, my gosh.
Somebody ought to tell that restaurant manager that, making his own customers nauseous is not going to look good on his quarterly earnings report.
Well, if you would have seen the way that, Whoopi and Joy Behar and Raven, the things they were saying about Trump and the look on their face, like they just, ate a sour lemon, and they were saying he doesn't like women and he doesn't have a lot of black people at his rallies, and
they're all at Rubio's rallies. Listen, well, I don't watch The View anymore. Ever since they were rude to Rosie and for talking about 9/11, I don't pay attention to that show. And my understanding is it's no longer a highly rated show. It's being kept in place because the idea is the corporate media is just going to throw this stuff at you from every direction, no matter where you turn and look. There's somebody out there pushing the propaganda, and people are tuning it out.
Yeah, and they were just cutting to this clip of a black lady being thrown out at Trump's rallies, and just all negative stuff. It was really sickening to watch. I mean, you could tell that they were just told what to do this morning, and of
course they're being told to do. I mean, I used to be a big fan of The Daily Show after John Oliver took it over, but for these last couple of weeks, it's just nonstop bashing Trump. I canceled the record series on my DVR.
Yeah, it was just, and what the amazing thing is that not a lot of the crowd was clapping after they would say something. Very little people were clapping, which was good. Actually,
I caught them using an applause track to try and make it sound like the audience agreed with him. But you can always tell an applause track if you know what to listen for. It's the way it fades up and fades down. Okay.
And also, they're not Trump's speech afterwards on Super Tuesday. I mean, he had some positive things, wanting to unite the Republican Party and, things about Hillary and what she's done. None of that's coming on, corporate media. It's just all the negative stuff and Kerry's look on his face and, just, very sickening to watch.
Yeah, it is, but I think the American people are finally waking up and realizing, just how it is that they have been controlled and bamboozled all these years.
Exactly. But that was it, Mike. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go, and I just found an article over at the Gateway Pundit talking about this situation at the Minnesota caucus where everybody was speaking Somali. It was just all these Somalis in there, and maybe they're all U.S. citizens, but again, they're trying to say that checking voter ID is somehow racist. No, it isn't. You're not supposed to vote in American elections unless you are a U.S. citizen. But we know that the Democrats rely heavily on illegal immigrants and refugees because they know they're going to vote Democratic, because the Democrats' entire campaign is, we're going to take stuff away from the people who were born in this country and give it to those of you coming across the border if you'll vote for us. That's basically it. All right, as we get on out of here, story coming out of USA Today. 6 New Jersey newspapers have now called on Chris Christie to resign his governorship based on his failed presidential campaign and because he endorsed Donald Trump. So they're out for blood. We'll be right back after news and commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. Let's turn to the war zones, emphasis on the plural. The U.S. Delta Force is now beginning operations in Iraq. And according to a U.S. official, they are there to target, detain, or kill the main ISIS operators in Iraq, although the Iraqis are saying that the U.S. forces keep getting in the way of operations against ISIS. And since it wasn't Iraq that lied to us about Saddam's nuclear weapons, I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. By the way, 3,841 people were killed in Iraq during February, and it's a quagmire. We're stuck in it, having to go back in over and over and over again because those gosh darn Iraqi people won't stay conquered. They just won't accept their U.S. puppet rulers. What is wrong with those people? Story coming out of the original antiwar.com, Plan B in the bankruptcy of U.S. Syria policy. Going on 5 years. They've been trying to get Assad out of there. And first it was, we have a right to go in because he's using gas on his own people. And that lie blew up in their face, and it was a lie. And it never made any sense anyway why Assad would use a banned chemical weapon, sarin gas, on his own Alawite supporters right in front of UN chemical weapons inspectors on the very day they showed up. It was false flag written all over it, and eventually the United Nations said, yeah, actually this is coming in from these so-called opposition rebel groups like the Free Syria Army, 95% of whom are not even from Syria. They are hired mercenaries. Now, in theory, the next round of Syrian peace talks is to commence on the 9th of March, next week. Assad is having parliamentary elections on the 13th of April. And the U.S. may be waiting to see how that election shapes up before giving the green light for the coming invasion, which everybody's gearing up for. Saudi Arabia's already out there saying, yeah, we're talking about invading Syria. We're going to invade Syria. Just get used to the idea. No, we don't have a justification. We don't have a moral or legal right. We just want to do it. And we're going to do what we want to do, and you just go along with it. Russian Foreign Ministry is reporting that the current ceasefire in Syria has been violated 31 times. Now, a little bit of good news. The Syrian army has captured the terrorist who helped murder one of the downed Russian pilots last November. So it may be interesting what this individual has to say. Russia continues to receive reports on artillery shelling from Turkey into Syria. Turkey is shelling Syria. So when this blows up into World War III, we know who started it. And it wasn't Syria, and it wasn't Russia. Story coming out of Blacklisted News. We will participate. Saudi military admits U.S. coalition mulling a ground invasion of Syria. They just need to figure out some way to make it look like it's Syria's fault or Russia's fault. We've been talking about how the Pentagon okayed a $683 million smart bomb deal for Turkey. Now, that's a lot of bombs. And these are bunker busters. They're getting ready to go on in and smash Syria. The U.S. is desperate to send a message to the rest of the world. If you do not run your nation and its economy for our benefit, we're going to come in and smash your place. That's it. It's like the Black Hand. Give us money or we're going to burn your business down. The U.S. government is acting like an organized crime outfit. Meanwhile, in Turkey, things are getting very unstable. The Turkish people are fed up with all of this nonsense. Erdogan is turning Turkey into a dictatorship. This is coming out of Pravda. Turkey is very unstable. The Turkish people are fed up with this. And Erdogan is consolidating his power and eliminating those who disagree with him. Apparently, since Erdogan passed a law in 2014 making it a crime to insult Erdogan, they have arrested 1,845 Turkish people for the crime of insulting the Führer. Recip, Uber, alles. Meanwhile, British troops are heading to Tunisia to keep ISIS off the Libyan border. No, what they're doing is they're planning the ground invasion of Libya from Tunisia, because Saudi Arabia has not been able to bomb the Yemen people into accepting their U.S.-approved puppet regime, which is why many of the Saudi military commanders are saying, we really don't think it's a good idea to try and go into Syria, which is a much more capable foe. Up in Ukraine, the corruption there is spreading. It's getting worse. Poroshenko and his cohorts are getting filthy rich off the backs of the people of Ukraine, and it may be an indication that Poroshenko knows his days in office are numbered, because the last official act of any government is to loot the nation. And it looks like Ukraine is there. We could still see a military coup against Poroshenko. There's talk of a new Maidan. It's not getting a lot of coverage in the corporate media because the new Maidan is against the U.S. puppet ruler, and if they succeed, they're going to pivot to Russia. Meanwhile, Ukrainian shelling has damaged 5 power stations in the west of Donetsk. They're still punishing those people over there. Now, Israel has granted the first Golan Heights oil drilling license to a Dick Cheney-linked company. And again, technically that's not Israeli territory. It's part of Syria. Israel's occupying it, but under international law that doesn't necessarily give them the rights of ownership. But Israel's attitude is, we're standing on it, it's ours, we're going to sell it to our good buddy Dick Cheney, who helped us get this whole war thing going. Now then, interesting article out of Global Research talking about the anti-boycott divestment sanctions motion being passed in the Canadian Parliament. And the article is saying that Canada sanctions other countries for human rights violations, but never Israel. Canada sanctions other countries for committing human rights violations, but never Israel. Canada protects Israel. And years ago, I tried to warn all you Canadians, take a lesson from what happened to the United States when our government got subverted by Israel. But you didn't listen to me. There you are here. The United Nations has now approved the toughest sanctions on North Korea in 20 years because North Korea dares to have a space program. They're calling for literally blockades against North Korea, in which all ships going in and out will be stopped and boarded and searched for contraband. They're trying to provoke a war in Korea as a backdoor to war with China because that's the ultimate goal. What the U.S. and these private central bankers want is for the ruble and the yuan to be destroyed and no longer be a threat to the paper Federal Reserve note. That's what's driving all of this. You can forget about terrorism, humanitarian invasion, regime change, all that word. It's a war between currencies. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, over in Great Britain, as you know, they're coming up soon on the Brexit referendum. The people of Britain want to go back to being their own country. The political leadership is struggling. They're still trying to move forward with this agenda for the New World Order of all the nations of the world in one big tax base, enslaved to a global private central bank for all eternity, off of which they all plan on profiting handsomely. And it's all coming apart between the predatory banking of the European Central Bank, the growing public awareness that private central banks are tools of mass enslavement, the immigration pressures. It's starting to come apart. And the people who are in favor of this New World Order are panicking. David Cameron is now demanding world leaders submit speeches they plan to make on the Brexit to number 10 Downing Street to be vetted. Cameron is literally saying, he's claiming the authority to tell other world leaders, you can't say this about Brexit. I don't think he's going to get a lot of cooperation. In fact, I think he's going to get a lot of anger. And keeping Britain in the European Union may not save the situation anyway. French President Francois Hollande says he wants Poland's membership in the European Union suspended over some of the frictions that they're seeing. It's tearing itself apart. It's absolutely tearing itself apart. So if you have some euro coins and paper notes, you might want to tuck them away. They may be collector's items sooner than you think. Alrighty, we're going to grab a phone call from Russell in North Carolina. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, let me talk about the election a little bit. The first thing that bothers me is it appears to be now the sine qua non that every candidate has got to disclose his tax returns. I think that's no one's business. What Trump or anyone else does, you do or don't do, is not the purview of the public at large.
It's a kind of a gray area because I think the American people have a reasonable expectation that when somebody wants to be running the country, that there should be some degree of transparency about their past. Now, Donald Trump apparently is under audit by the Internal Revenue Service, and it's not advisable to release his tax returns while that audit is going on. Of course, Trump is audited every single year. But if you want to put it on a scale of candidate transparency, look at everything that was hidden from us during Bill Clinton's campaign. Look at everything they're trying to hide during Hillary Clinton's campaign. I mean, if they're going back to Fred Trump's getting caught in a KKK riot 19 years ago, they can't find anything on Donald Trump. It's all innuendo. I'm pretty sure there's something bad there, and the fact that he can't release his... they're just...
Well, I just want to give my viewpoint on that, and you have a different viewpoint. That's okay. At least different viewpoints are being illuminated, shall we say. The next thing is this clown Mitt Romney.
Yes.
If there's a poster boy for greed in this world, it's Romney. He's probably worth $350 million. He never produced a bit of wealth his entire life. And he's a Pale Ale Mormon. My attitude is Romney is dangerous. I never voted for him. I wouldn't vote for him. In fact, I haven't voted for the last 15, 20 years, actually, but that's a side point.
Never vote. It just encourages the bastards.
Well, different people, different ideas, but I mean, I couldn't go along with Bush and McCain, Romney or any. They're just not the type of people I would vote for. Trump comes closer. Now, the one thing about Trump that's interesting is that you, Alex Jones, and a guy by the name of Tex Mars, who you may be familiar with,
yes,
all are very much pro-Trump, which is interesting three major pundits in this world are all saying different things, shall we say, but they're all by and large pro-Trump, which is interesting. Another thing, Tex Mars, and I don't know how he does it, he was the first one to my knowledge who mentioned that Rubio was queer, that Trump was queer. No, I'm sorry, that's wrong. That Cruz was homosexual, and also that John Roberts, the Supreme Court judge, was. Now, I knew about Roberts, and I didn't know about Rubio. I didn't know about Cruz, but it's interesting that Roberts was blackmailed to vote for that Obamacare twice. And I'm 72 years old, and it amazes me how corrupt this society is. It's getting worse and worse. It's unbelievable. The federal judiciary, as an example, these guys all make $175,000 to $200,000 or something in their ballpark. They operate in big oak-paneled offices. They're all supposed to be respected, but the one thing they don't ever give is justice. You know, we hear about equal justice under law. I went to law school. I was brainwashed a long time ago. We hear about equal justice under law. The judges have absolute immunity. The prosecutors have absolute immunity. The police, for all practical purposes, have absolute immunity. They can shoot whoever, kill whoever they feel like, and always get away with it. This is the sickening state of affairs in this society. It turns my stomach. There's nothing I can do about it.
Well, I disagree with that absolute last statement you make. We're doing something about it now. We're educating the public. We're out there pushing for Trump. We're trying to bring about a peaceful revolution in this country so that we can avoid a violent revolution. And I think we're down to that choice. There's going to be a revolution one way or the other. How bloody it's going to be is basically going to be up to the power elite right now. But every time you get out there and you talk about it, you are doing something about it, and that's exactly what we're doing. As far as how corrupt the system is, yeah, it is. And the problem is that once a government and a system starts to go corrupt, it goes all the way corrupt, because the corrupted will never allow the uncorrupted to be in there to spoil the party. That's why they kicked out Ron Paul. That's why they're trying to get rid of Donald Trump. And I'm not saying that Donald Trump is a saint, okay? But again, he's not a professional career politician. He comes from the world of business, where you survive or not based on keeping your word. And
this Speaker of the House, I can't think of his name offhand, he makes me sick. He's saying we can't have a candidate who believes this or won't disavow that. Who made him God Almighty to determine what the alleged Republican Party stands for, doesn't stand for, or anything else? That's a form of tyranny. I mean,
that's exactly right.
Trump and everyone else should have freedom of speech. These guys, I can't remember the name of the Speaker of the House. He's from Wisconsin.
Yeah.
These guys are whores. They voted for Obama's $1.1 trillion budget with the 250,000 H-2B visas and the $1.34 billion refugee resettlement. It's sickening. And this other clown in the Senate, McConnell.
Yeah.
He is no good either, as far as and these are so-called Republicans. My attitude: if this whole thing breaks up the Republican Party, let's have at it. But I think McConnell and these guys. McConnell is married to a Chinese woman. He's phenomenally wealthy. He has his own private jet and everything else. I don't know all the details. I never met him, but I suspect these guys, all they care about is their offices and their limousines.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. They're sociopathic. By the way, the Speaker of the House is Paul Ryan. Thank you for the phone call, and I'm going to have a little more feedback when we come back from these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go to the phones here. Sherry in Missouri. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I just say hashtag the party is over. And it doesn't matter whether it's Democrat or Republican. The American people are sick of the establishment.
Yeah, they are. That's what this whole Trump phenomenon is about. I mean, if the economy were healthy and we had jobs and the world was at peace and Trump he'd be seen as kind of a distraction at best. But he is a reactionary candidate. People are turning to him because they are fed up with the existing system. It's like that caller who was saying before the commercial break. They think they are gods. And they are walking around with this attitude that they know what's best for the country and you don't, so you should just shut up and let them run the place. Of course, what they know is what's best for their own wallets. And they're sociopathic. They're in love with their own image. And, it is the curse of political power that it attracts the very sort of people who should never be allowed to have it. And that's why the Founding Fathers designed this government to intentionally weaken it, to prevent the accrual of power in a single hand or a small set of hands, 3 branches of government, powers diffused across the state and county level. And they understood, if you have a government with a central power to it, the wrong people want that power, and they'll do anything to get it. And once they have it, they'll do anything with it. Which brings me back to Hillary Clinton. Because if she should get the White House, do you think she's going to want to stop there? Look at her war record. Look how she laughed about killing Gaddafi. Hillary may be dreaming about being Empress of the Earth.
Well, just one last comment. Do you think it's funny that checks and balances is what the banksters use for us to, they just take and interpret the Constitution. Checks and balances is what the 3 branches of government were supposed to do. And now that's what we do with our bank account every month.
Well, it is kind of an interesting use of phrase, but again, the original goal was to have a federal government whose only role was to act as an arbitrator among the separate states, because the United States was actually formed as a confederation, where every one of the states was its own little country, and that central federal government was just there to sort of keep things sorted out between them and not run the place. And that central federal government was deliberately broken into 3 pieces so that they could keep an eye on each other and keep them in line. Over the last 100 years, since the founding of the Federal Reserve, we have lost that.
It's a sad state of affairs, but I think America is waking up. And
I agree with you. They are waking up. Now it's time to get angry. And I give you permission.
Been mad.
Well, I give you permission to be angry. It's like that wonderful line out of Patty Chayefsky's Network. I'm mad as heck, and I'm not going to take this anymore. We all need to actually be out there saying that right now, because we have been abused and taken advantage of and lied to. Our children have been taken from us and killed in these wars of conquest. We're being looted and plundered at every single turn, and it's time for us to get angry.
We have trusted too much.
Yes.
And we're tired of trusting them anymore.
Well, see, that's why when you're very young and they get you into kindergarten or they get you into Sunday school and they teach you to believe that things are good. And just believe, and belief is a poor substitute for reason. It really is. But those beliefs...
Logic, reason, and strategy.
The beliefs are literally chains placed on your mind because they get you when you're young. They indoctrinate you with certain beliefs about what a great country we live in and we're the good guys and everybody else is the bad guys. And as you grow up, your personality forms around those core beliefs. And that's what traps you. It takes a tremendous effort of will to break free of those belief chains.
You just don't know any different as a child.
That's right.
And that's where they take advantage.
They certainly do. I mean, at that age, you don't realize that the big people are full of crud.
Hey, well, Mommy and Daddy told you about the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus and all that.
Yeah, I remember when I figured out with the slide rule that Santa Claus couldn't be real. And I got beat up for it by my schoolmates.
All right. Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you. We're going to switch over here to Peter in California. Peter, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I want to talk about Bernie Sanders for just a second here.
Yes.
I really don't believe that he's a serious candidate. And it's too bad, other than his stance on Israel and his semi-warmongering, he's not quite as bad, but nearly as bad. But I like his domestic stuff, better than anybody else's. But I don't think that he's serious, Mike. I think that if he were, when he let Hillary go on the emails, he doesn't bring up the fact that she may be the most catastrophic Secretary of State that we've ever had.
Yes.
That's never brought up. The corruption's never brought up. He never goes for the throat at all. And I have a feeling that he was just put in there in case she gets indicted, or in case she drops dead, and to make it look
I'm in agreement with you. I mean, I did talk about that other article, just saying that he needs to play hardball. He needs to wake up and realize that if he were to try, he could actually possibly win this thing. And but I'm in agreement with you the way he dodged the whole email issue. I think he's in there just to make the Democratic voters think they've got some kind of a choice when it's been very obvious right from day one that Debbie Wasserman Schultz was saying Hillary will be our candidate, mahi dictum est. Get used to it. And I think Bernie Sanders is angling to be Hillary's vice president, and Hillary is going to have to pick Bernie Sanders to be her vice president, or she's going to lose all of his supporters over to Donald Trump.
You know, and I don't believe it's unfortunate that you called it about the email stuff, and after the election, what the State Department just came out and said. But I honestly, Obama is so complicit in this that he cannot allow anybody but Hillary to win, I don't think.
Well, we've seen the White House get handed off time and time again exactly that way. I mean, when George Herbert Walker Bush was in the White House and the whole Iran-Contra scandal blew up with government-sanctioned drug running and gun running going on, and George W. Bush knew that if he stayed in the White House for a second term, he was not going to be able to keep the investigation from reaching him. And so he decided he was going to throw his reelection, and he picked a Democrat that he knew he could trust with the White House because that Democrat was as deep into the drug running and gun running as Bush was. And that was the governor of Arkansas, Bill Clinton. And that's why you had the CIA-controlled media were propping up Bill Clinton. We have the executive producer, Don Hewitt of 60 Minutes, admitting they edited the Jennifer Flowers show that they did to make her look stupid and help Bill Clinton. And they just handed the White House off. I'll give you another example from that. When Richard Nixon decided he was not going to be able to stay in the White House much longer, he didn't want to leave the White House to Spiro Agnew because Spiro Agnew might just go along with continuing the investigations into Watergate. So they ginned up a scandal to drive Spiro Agnew out of the vice presidency, and they appointed Gerald Ford, who had also served on the Warren Commission covering up the Kennedy assassination, and Nixon resigned knowing that Gerald Ford would keep the lid on what was really involved with Watergate and Nixon's connection to the assassination. And sure enough, Gerald Ford came in. The first thing he did was say, our national pain is over. I'm pardoning everybody. End of story. And it was covered up. So, yeah, we do see the White House get handed back and forth. And I'll tell you what, Peter, stay on the line. I'm going to come back to you after the commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before I go back to the phones, I just have to comment on this article in which Iceland's capital, Reykjavik, has now extended their ban on products made in the occupied territories to a ban on all products made in Israel. And basically saying that they're sending a clear message. They will not purchase products from Israel while Israel oppresses another people on the basis of ethnicity and race and continues having the wall inside Palestine. And, of course, it's drawing criticism from Israel's support, saying, and I'm not kidding you, what about the 6 million Jews who perished in the Holocaust? Newsflash, Iceland had nothing to do with the Holocaust. The Holocaust, whatever it was, if it happened, how much it happened before we were all born. How about joining all of the rest of us here in the 21st century? I'm getting sick and tired of everybody trying to excuse Israel's behavior over something that happened long before we were born. Anyway, getting on back to Peter in California. My goodness.
Well, that's good news, Michael, but, we're already putting bases. As you read, we already are putting bases back into Iceland, so maybe we'll invade them from within, or pull some sort of, subversion of their government, because we're re-Cold Warring, the North Atlantic. But I just wanted to say, as you were talking about how the presidents cover up their crimes and so on, the centrality of the Kennedy assassination when, in my opinion, Lyndon Johnson was four square behind the whole thing, really. But then Lyndon Johnson, Madeline Brown puts Nixon at that meeting right before the assassination with all the people who perpetrated it, and then Ford, and then, you can excuse, I guess, Jimmy Carter, but then in comes George Bush the first, who was also involved with that.
Yes.
And then you can kind of excuse Clinton on that, but then in comes George the second, who, you know, his supporters are the same families that backed the Kennedy assassination, in my opinion, anyways. But it goes through 45 or 50 years of our history.
Well, yeah, there's no question that the John F. Kennedy assassination was effectively a coup d'etat. And, you know, we were basically seeing warring dynasties because, you know, Richard Nixon was well aware that John F. Kennedy cheated in the election. And from Nixon's point of view and his supporters, they were looking at a 24-year Kennedy dynasty because there was going to be John F. Kennedy. Robert Kennedy was the Attorney General. He was going to run and eventually did run for president until they shot him off the podium. And they were going to queue up Ted Kennedy to be the third Kennedy in a row into the White House until they tried to assassinate him at Chappaquiddick. And Mary Jo Kopechne's death ended Ted Kennedy's run for the White House, so they didn't feel they had to go back and finish the job. But, yeah, that's how the politics are really being played behind the scenes.
It's unbelievable. It really is a criminal. It's really a criminal enterprise. And
it really it's a real life game of drones.
And how successful might they have been at hiding that from even smart people who are involved. You know,
yeah, but you see, that's what we have taken away from them with the independent media and the internet and the blogs. We have taken away their invisibility. Now we see what their true nature is, their true character, how these things are actually done, and how disenfranchised the American people have become. We had an article on WhatReallyHappened.com today where somebody did a study about how much the American people really influence the affairs of the nation, and basically said that 95% of what we want is simply ignored by the powers that be.
Oh, I'm surprised it's not more. But yeah, you know, I'm surprised it's not more than that.
Okay.
I know. Thanks, Michael. Thanks
I'm sorry to rush you off here, but we've got Scott in Wisconsin who's been waiting for 11 minutes, and I really did want to get to him. Scott, aloha. Thank you for waiting. What's on your mind?
Hi, Brother Michael. How you doing today? Hey, Mike, I wanted just to listen to me nation right now, and I wish you would listen. Mikey, my message right now is you were talking about for way back when I was talking to you years back about getting prepared. Right now, Michael, did you hear last week that off the coast of California, they tested a NIT ballistic nuclear missile that was shot off coast, and it landed like 4,200 miles away into the water. I don't know if did you pick that up?
Oh, yeah, it went right overhead from us.
Yeah. Right. Yes, Mike, you know, with this situation over in the chess game of Syria, there's no doubt what you were talking about Al-Qaeda, how it's a facetious name, and this ISIS is another new name that's facetious of our guys being in Syria, trying to create that buffer zone so they can take out Assad. And now we see Turkey, that the leader of them said the other day, are you the United States or not? And I wanted to know if you know that Turkey's been shelling just inside the border over there. And, Michael, I just wanted to say this before I go. It's going to be an interesting march because I don't know if this is going to happen, but they were saying something like 350,000 troops in the middle of March marching up on the side of Syria. And then I also heard, Mikey, a while back that they're going to do an exercise over with with South Korea, and they're talking 400,000 men in that one. So I just wanted you to comment if you could about this. And aloha, Michael. I love you. God bless.
All right. Thank you very much. Well, yeah, everybody is running a dress rehearsal for World War III because from the point of view of the United States of America, from the U.S. government, rather, if they cannot force the world back to using the U.S. dollar for global trade and banking and for buying and selling natural resources only for the U.S. dollar, the U.S. economy is going to implode. because we've lost our manufacturing in quantity and quality. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. And so from that point of view, they have no choice but to move forward. And for the individual leaders, they understand that short of conquering the world and declaring victory, they're looking at war crimes charges for all the torture, for all the drone strikes on innocent civilians. And they don't care how many of your sons and daughters are going to have to be sent to their deaths. They want to protect themselves from that hangman's noose up in The Hague. And that's how they think. You're just resources, your assets, your human capital, your chips in the great game of world empire. And they're going to spend your children just like monopoly money to get what they want. That's the leadership that we have right now. All right, we're going to grab one more phone call here before the top of the hour news break. Rob in Minnesota, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, sir. How are you?
I'm doing okay.
First-time caller. I'd have a main question for you, actually. But I'd sum it up to one. It would be, how is it that you keep it all together and not lose your temper? Because after I see what they're trying to do to Donald Trump and throw Hillary Clinton out there as like some kind of superhero, I'm enraged. Because I'm recently awakened. I looked at some things, and it's absolutely ridiculous what they're trying to pull. The American populace, if they vote for Donald Trump, then Donald Trump is the president. Now, unfortunately for him, if there's somebody that disagrees with him, you're fired. You know, and that could be the guy that says, hey, don't push that button over there. You know, it's ridiculous. But I'd say it like this. Hillary Clinton is the face of evil. And I looked everything up that I could possibly look up on her when I recently awoke.
We're going to get nasty emails from evil now.
Yeah, you know, I have no electronic signature. I'm using somebody's phone. So I'll say to you like that. I'm a veteran. I'll say to you like that. And Common Core education, Michael, I can tell you like this. I was called a terrorist at a local establishment. They are an American Legion, but they're also journalists at BMW.
Okay, Rob, I am terribly, terribly sorry. We're going to have to take a break now for our top of the hour news and commercials. Thank you very much for the phone call. We'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3, and we're going to go right to the phone calls here and talk to Scott in Virginia, who's been waiting very, very patiently. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Michael. How's it going today?
It's going, you know, about as well as can be expected.
Well, I called to talk to you about who you think Trump might pick as a vice presidential running mate. But before I get into that, I just saw something on Reuters news service that I thought was hilarious. And it reminded me of that scene from Happy Days when Fonzie is water skiing.
Yes.
He jumps the shark.
Yes.
This is from yesterday. It's on Reuters. It's still on there now. It's an article by Jonathan Landay, and the title is, Bin Laden called for Americans to rise up over climate change.
I was going to get to that almost immediately in point of fact.
And supposedly it's a handwritten letter urging Americans to fight climate change. Can you believe that? Who possibly would buy that?
Well, wait a minute. So if we fight global warming, won't the terrorists win? If we're opposed to Osama bin Laden, we've got to go on out and burn a lot of coal and oil right now.
They are just throwing up everything. They're just throwing up anything to see if it sticks.
Emphasis on throwing up.
Yes. Well, I wanted to ask you if you've given any thought to who you think Trump might pick or should pick for his VP nominee.
There have been a lot of rumors flying, nothing directly from Trump himself. I think people are, as that earlier caller said, I think the GOP, if they cannot force Trump out, they're going to pick his vice president for him. But I think Donald Trump is going to do, what any presidential candidate is going to do, pick a vice president who's going to draw as many votes in as possible. Trump could even tap Marco Rubio on the assumption that these lawsuits against Ted Cruz are going to get him out of the race because he doesn't meet the natural born citizen requirement. But other than that, I don't know. It's still wide open. I know a lot of people were joking that he should tap Jesse Ventura. I'm certainly available. I'm willing to suspend my Rivero 26 campaign to help the Trump cause. And I'm going to hold out for head of NASA. Seriously, I don't really know. I think it's almost too early in the process to say.
Wouldn't it be great? My guess is, and this is just a guess, it's going to be an unconventional pick because he's never held office. So I think he could pick somebody who has never held office. And what would happen if he were to pick someone from the business world, a black female executive out of the business world?
I think he would be attacked for not getting a career experienced politician, but I think you're absolutely right. If he were to pick a female vice presidential running mate, he would yank the woman's vote right out from underneath Hillary Clinton.
And he's got that option.
I mean, really? if she were still in Congress, I'd say go with Cynthia McKinney. She's black, she's female, she's well-liked in the independent media community. She stood up to Israel at great personal cost. This is a woman of integrity. And, but yeah, I think right now the smartest thing Donald Trump could do is pick a female vice president, and that would absolutely pull the rug out from underneath Hillary.
If I could make one other quick point.
Sure.
And I was discussing it today with a coworker. My opinion is McCain was the second worst GOP nominee we ever had, followed by Mitt Romney, who was the number one worst GOP nominee that's ever been put forward. And with McCain, I think there was a 7% difference between him and Obama, and with Mitt Romney, it was less than that. It was like maybe 4%.
Yes.
If Hillary couldn't beat Obama, and Obama just beat McCain by about 7 percentage points, right?
Mm-hmm.
Followed by the worst 8 years of a GOP presidency that's ever existed, right?
Yes.
Then how can she possibly hope to beat one of the most popular GOP nominees? Really, before I don't even.
Well, because they're going to Diebold. We guarantee the election results.
I don't remember Reagan ever filling 30,000-seat stadiums during campaign.
Well, we saw that again when Romney was out there. Ron Paul was filling these huge venues. Mitt Romney's people were photoshopping his venues to try and make it look like he was drawing the huge crowds. It was all smoke and mirrors and illusion. We know that there's massive election fraud going on, and Hillary may be counting on that. Or Hillary may be planning on, if you look at all these liberals who are out there openly talking about assassinating Donald Trump to get him out of the system. Now, John McCain self-destructed. If he had picked a credible female running mate, he probably would have beaten Barack Obama. And I do not understand what possessed McCain and his campaign people to pick Caribou Barbie. And I remember at the time, I was in contact with Hawaii's Governor Linda Lingle, who I will grant you doesn't look as hot in a bikini as Sarah Palin did. But Linda Lingle knew how to do the job. And if McCain had tapped somebody like Linda Lingle, I think he would have won. And sometimes it shows you just how incredibly stupid some of these people can be in their decision making.
But it also shows how weak Obama and Hillary were, because coming off 8 years of a disastrous Bush presidency and a horrible economy, you would think automatically the GOP wouldn't even have a shot of coming close to beating Obama. But they still did with one of their worst GOP nominees. So now they have Trump, who's by far the most popular that I've ever heard.
Yeah, but he's not their nominee. He's the people's nominee. And we can't let the people run this country. We could see democracy break out, and where would that get us all?
But I think he's making, like Reagan did, he's making Trump Democrats.
Yes.
And no, the GOP has not been able to do that since Reagan, and Trump is making Trump Democrats.
Well, looking at the numbers out of Massachusetts, it does appear that a lot of those people who gave up their Democratic Party membership did, in fact, go on over to support Trump.
They're mad at the establishment,
yes,
which includes the GOP, and the fact that both the DNC and the GOP are scared of Trump makes you know that he's for real. He's for real.
You know, I would like to see the Democratic National Committee and the Republican National Committee destroy themselves in this election cycle. You know, this country was never supposed to have two parties that simply passed government off back and forth between them. That's not how this country was started. There were supposed to be as many parties as people wanted to fund. There were strict limits on campaign donations so that a candidate's financial resources was a true measure of their popular support. And all of that has been taken away from us. And our government's openly for sale to the highest bidder now. And Trump is the one presidential candidate who cannot be bought because he's got his own money. He's got more money than he knows what to do with.
And Michael, this is the first candidate who has told me publicly, told us voters publicly, that he doesn't want us to donate to him. That's the first time in my life I've ever heard anybody run for president that said, "I don't want your money. I don't."
No, that's not what he said. That's not what he said. If you go over to his campaign website, and we do have a link from my page to his page now, there is a button for ordinary citizens to donate to. What he won't take is large corporate money. That's where he drew the line.
But he said, from my memory, he said, "I don't need anybody's money."
He doesn't. But people want to donate to him, and they are donating to him, and so forth. Anyway, listen, we got to go. We got to take a break for commercials. We got a ton of calls to get to in the next segment, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Boy, the phone lines are really loaded up. David in California. Aloha. What's on your mind today?
What's on my mind is that Donald Trump was outrageously cheated last night in Colorado, and the mainstream media is not reporting on it. I was watching at Breitbart. There's an interview with Wolf Blitzer and P. Wasserman Schultz, and he's talking about Super Tuesday with her, and she says, "Oh, the Republicans are in such disarray that they canceled their caucus in Colorado." So I went to the Denver Post to read up on it, and it says this, and it's just a brief passage. I won't bore you. State Republican Party Chairman Steve House said the party 24-member executive committee made the unanimous decision Friday. 6 members were absent to skip the preference poll. The move, he said, would give Colorado delegates the freedom to support any candidate eligible at the Cleveland Convention in July. Republican National Committee officials confirmed that the change complies with party rules. Quote, "If we do a binding presidential preference poll, we would then pledge our delegates, and the candidates we bind them to may not be in the race by the time we get to the convention," House said in an interview Tuesday. Then the article finishes and says, "Other caucus states are grappling with the rule change in different ways. They finalized their plans for the deadline at the end of September," Putnam said. But he's not aware of any state that has abandoned the presidential caucus vote. With the change, the only way Colorado Republican delegates would remain relevant is the remote chance that no candidate emerges as a clear winner in the primary contest. In this case, the state's unbound delegates receive significant attention and may hold the key to victory in a floor fight. Quote, "If there's potential for a brokered convention in any way, the unaffiliated delegates become extremely important," unquote, said Joy Hoffman, the Arapahoe County GOP chairwoman who attended the party meeting. Quote, "If there's someone who becomes a front runner, then nobody's important. So I think the view became that if we were not bound, it's not the worst thing that could happen." Effectively, they just created super delegates in the Republican Party, and Trump was cheated of any delegates he could have won in Colorado last night. And mainstream media didn't even mention that. I was watching the returns coming in. I was like, no, how comes the Democrats are having a caucus and the Republicans aren't? And they didn't say why. Nobody mentioned it. I've done a search. Nobody in the media is reporting on this at all. They are doing a stealth rule change to try to steal the convention from Trump.
Okay, now, first of all, the fact that they just called off the caucuses and told the voters we're not interested in what you had to say, that is very infuriating to me. If you find any online articles about that, send it on in so I can link to it. But yeah, that's the kind of skullduggery that we're seeing. Now, the reason the corporate media never reports on it is because the corporate media is part of the vote rigging machine. Most Americans don't realize that our national elections, including the primaries and the caucuses, are not counted by any kind of a government agency or a civilian body. They are counted by a privately owned company that is known by the name Voters News Service, although they change their actual name every once in a while to try and stay out of the public spotlight. But this is a private company that is owned by the major TV networks and the Washington Post and the New York Times, which is why they're always getting the results and numbers at exactly the same time. This company has been caught rigging elections in the past. There's no civilian oversight. There is no auditing or double-checking. The corporate media is selling you the illusion our elections are fair and honest and trustworthy. The only time they're going to report on election fraud is when it is so obvious they have to report it or be seen not to report it. And then it's always followed up with, but don't worry, it's nothing to concern yourself with. It doesn't change the final outcome, which is an absolutely unsupportable statement, because if you have uncovered evidence of election fraud, you haven't uncovered it all. You can't know how much more there is. Therefore, you cannot, in all rationality, say it didn't change the actual outcome. The corporate media are part of this problem. And remember, the corporate media are under the control of the Central Intelligence Agency through a program called Operation Mockingbird that's been in place ever since the end of World War II. And that's why the corporate media, that's why we have this absurd situation where when the official results don't match the exit polls, the corporate media is going to come out and say, oh, well, the voters were lying to the exit pollsters. Why would they?
Well, if you read Robert Caro's famous, excellent history biography of LJ in Volume 1, he gets into, like, Texas. The voter fraud in Texas is off the charts. And last night, I was watching Texas returns, and before that, for a couple days before, the latest polls were showing Donald Trump was closed in the gap with Cruz,
yes,
and that he was tied with him, a dead heat, statistically. And last night, all of a sudden, Cruz shot way ahead and won like 17 points, something ridiculous. And I suspect there was probably a lot of voter fraud and cheating going on.
We already know that. All the people were calling the radio station saying when they were trying to vote for Trump, the vote would switch over to Rubio. It's an established fact. There was election fraud going on in most of those states yesterday, and Texas is definitely at the top of the list. The elections are crooked. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, if the elections are rigged, why should I bother voting? And that's a very important reality to remember. Election fraud can shift a race a few percentage points, but it can't reverse a landslide or everybody knows that's what happened. And right now they're cheating to such an extent, it is being seen. They got it on videotape in Iowa and New Hampshire. Everybody in Texas knows that there was rigging going on down there. All these other places where people were being handed ballots that were already checked off. It's out in the open. Everybody knows that's what's going on here. And so for those of you who are supporting Trump, it's not just enough to get him in the lead. We have to put him so far in the lead that they can't cheat him out of it without everybody saying, oh, they just stole this from Donald Trump. And at that point, we warm up the tar and we start plucking the chickens.
Because you know what? The TPP, when that gets ratified, that is the lock on the prison door clicking shut behind all of us.
Yes. It absolutely is. Okay?
Good day. Have a good day. Keep up the work.
All right, I'll do my best here, and we seem to be having some issues with our telephones. We're going to feed the hamster and see if that gets a little bit better. We're coming up on a commercial break right now. I got 3 more callers I'm going to take, and then we're going to close the phone lines for the last segment because I do want to get into some of this stuff about, Osama bin Laden was worried about global warming and all this other nonsense that's coming on in there. So we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with these last 3 phone calls after these 2 words. And Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We've got 2 more phone calls to take, and we're going to start with Irene in California. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, I just want to follow up on the VP pick for Trump.
Yes.
I think you should choose somebody that the establishment hates as much as they hate him or more, and that will be his life insurance policy. And then make sure they're never on the same plane at the same time.
Well, that's why there's an Air Force too.
Well, okay.
Okay.
That's what I would do.
No, you didn't know that? Yeah, there's a rule. The president and vice president never travel together. The president gets Air Force One, and the vice president gets Air Force Two.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, well, Rubio would be a disaster.
I'm going to go back. I think the smartest thing Trump could do is pick a female vice presidential running mate, and he'll yank the women's vote right out from underneath Hillary.
That would be cool, as long as she's anti-establishment, though.
Well, I'm sure there's a bunch of them out there. Like I said, I wish Cynthia McKinney was still in Congress. That would be a huge plus. I'd love to see Cynthia McKinney as the vice president.
I agree.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot. We're going to switch to Steve in Texas. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I wanted to talk about a way of possibly precluding the Republicans from making a brokered convention, stop all the attacks and all that sort of thing. But what they're doing is all predicated on the idea that all of the voters in the Republican Party are going to get behind whatever candidate they pick. If we make sure that they know that that's not true, and that they will, in fact, lose the election by sending several million emails and phone calls to the Republican National Committee and the principals in the Senate, like Mitch McConnell and so forth and so on, in the next couple of weeks, to explain to them that if they steal the election from Trump, that we will not only not vote for whoever the Republican candidate is, but we will not vote for any Republican who is not a strict dyed-in-the-wool constitutionalist.
Well, the problem is we're already seeing these people coming out like William Kristol, who are saying, I'm okay with Hillary getting the White House as long as Donald Trump doesn't. And that is a very dangerous mindset, where we have the Republican National Committee, who are calling all the shots, literally saying, we're okay losing the White House. We're that afraid of Donald Trump. The only way that we're going to get past this machination, we're going to have to get the remaining caucuses and primaries so over the top for Trump that they're not going to be able to resort to a brokered convention. That's their next step. Unfortunately, after that, there's going to be a crosshair on Donald Trump.
Well, I think that they'll do everything that they can between now and then to try to make sure that Trump doesn't.
Well, that's the whole point of the election fraud. I mean, Trump is still winning, but not by as much as he needs to lock in the nomination. That's why they were taking votes away from him and giving them to Rubio, is so that Trump can't get enough delegates to where he goes into the convention and his nomination is assured. They're going to force a brokered convention during which they're going to kick Trump out. That's what they're going to do. That's their next plan. If they can't succeed with that, I'm very concerned that after that, they're going to simply take Trump out by direct action. Because everybody's talking about it over on and even some of the Republicans are saying better assassinate him than have him tarnish the brand of the GOP party. And like I said before, the GOP brand is tarnished. At this point, I don't consider myself affiliated with any party. My political philosophy is that of a paleocon and a constitutionalist, but, I can't be a Democrat. I can't be a Republican. Frankly, looking at both these parties for all these years, anarchy's looking attractive right now.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But regarding what you said about the GOP establishment being more willing to take Hillary as a president than Trump has been getting 46 to 48% of the delegates in all of these elections, even the ones that there are serious questions about. And there are also a large number of people who claim that they're going to vote for Bernie Sanders, just say that as an alternative they will vote for Trump because they will not vote for Hillary Clinton for anything.
Well, that's why I think Hillary Clinton is going to tap Bernie Sanders as her VP to keep them from deserting.
Well, I'm not sure that would do the trick, but either way, I think Trump can take enough people with him from the Republican Party to do one of two things: either win the election or break the back of the two-party system.
Either one would be a positive outcome. I think it's time that these two traditional parties were broken. That's not in the Constitution that we're supposed to have these two permanent parties. That was the two-party system is an invention to save corporations on money, because they only have to donate to two candidates every election to bypass the will of the people, instead of having to donate to 5 or 6 parties. That's the reason the two-party system came around.
That's right, and they've been using it as a good cop, bad cop routine for the last 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, well, now we realize it's bad cop, bad cop.
Yeah.
Okay?
You can say that again.
All right, well, listen, Steve, thank you very much. I got to let you go here. We're running out of time, and we're going to close the phone lines now. And let's see. I had to send a message to our control room here. All righty, now then, there is a winter weather advisory now in effect until 11 o'clock for the I-90 Lookout Pass near Missoula. And they're talking about ice and snow. Monster traffic jams in Moscow after heaviest spring snowfall in 50 years. 7 Michigan cities have experienced the snowiest March 1st ever. Ever. Now, as that caller mentioned earlier in the show, there's this story going around that they have uncovered this handwritten letter that Osama bin Laden was worried about climate change. And the American people have to save humanity from global warming. And like I said, that means that if we oppose global warming, we're on the side of the terrorists, right? Somebody want to sort this out? It is absurd. It's getting absurd. But even more absurd is this other story from the UK Met Office. Now, you probably remember back in 2009, the UK Met Office gained notoriety, not to mention ridicule and abuse, by declaring that the winter of 2009 was going to be a snow-free Britain, and snow got hit with one of the heaviest, iciest winters in history. So now, having learned absolutely nothing, the UK Met Office is saying that there's going to be a serious snap of cold weather over Great Britain, but it's caused by sudden stratospheric warming. This is a rehash of global warming causes cold weather. And my response to that is take a pan of water, put it on the stove on low heat. When it freezes over, you get back to me. It's just absurd how they're still out there pushing this. They're desperate for the carbon taxes. And, of course, everybody who signed on to Al Gore's nonsense, they're desperate to preserve their reputation. You know, we hung our reputation on this global warming. We've got to stick with it. Even though it's wrong, you know, if we admit it's wrong, you know, we'll be in trouble. That kind of intellectual inertia is why the theory of epicycles lasted 400 years, history's longest-running science goof. Now then, speaking of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, she's apparently good friends with all of these legalized loan sharks called the payday loan companies. And apparently Debbie Wasserman Schultz is pushing a bill to disable, to gut forthcoming regulations on the payday loan industry. She wants them to go on ripping off Americans left and right. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, the last segment of our program today. Here we're going to talk about the economy a little bit. I know it's a little bit out of order. Over in the European Union, the banks are basically in a situation of turmoil, much as they are here in the United States of America. Interesting little article from goldcore.com is reporting on some research done by the Financial Times, trying to figure out why the banks are in turmoil, and they found, to nobody's surprise, that the bail-in regulations that have just been passed have resulted in a lot of Europeans closing their savings accounts and taking the cash home. which makes perfect sense. If you're going to tell your savings account depositors, you put your money in the bank and we're going to take a little bit of it away from you on a constant basis for the privilege of having your money in our bank, they're going to take their money out. I mean, for anybody, certainly who's my age, we were all told that banks operated by you putting your money in, they would reloan it out and split the interest with you, and your money would grow. And today, it's very different. You will put your money in the bank, and we get to take parts of it whenever we need. It reminds me of that South Park episode about how it's gone. It is amazing how prescient South Park has been on so many of these issues here. Now, China is rebuking Moody because Moody has cut China's debt outlook to negative over uncertainty on economic reforms and fiscal risks. Well, economic reforms, that's a leverage to tell China, you run your economy the way we ought to tell you. The problem is globalism, because China is a manufacturing export economy, and their major customers were Europe and the United States. And as the Western-centric economy locks up, people in Europe and the United States can't buy products, even the Chinese imports. And by the way, if you have gone to your local store that carries Chinese imported goods lately, you will have seen the prices have gone through the roof as the dollar devalues. That's the downside of globalism. When it goes bad anywhere, it drags the whole system down. Moody's is also warning of a 30% rise in commodity-based company bankruptcies this year. Specifically mining companies, oil companies, we already know they're in trouble. Now, as you heard on the top of the hour news break, Sports Authority is getting ready to file for bankruptcy protection. And apparently the largest private employer in Morris County, Texas, is getting ready to close its entire operation. It's all locking up because you can't run an economy with all the money in the pockets of the 0.01%. Because there aren't enough of them to run around to all the shopping malls and buy the volume of manufactured goods to keep the economy going. Money junkies, unfortunately, cannot see that because they are money junkies, and in the throes of their addiction, they cannot see how their behavior harms society as a whole. And the central federal government, whose job it should be to keep watch on what's good for the country as a whole, has aligned themselves with the money junkies, which is the classic definition of fascism. Now, the NATO chief is out there, General Breedlove, who's been out there talking about we're going to have war with Russia, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. They're making all these provocative statements associated with the test firing of the ICBMs from Vandenberg. Now he's out there saying that Vladimir Putin has weaponized the refugee crisis in order to destroy Europe. That's the latest Russia-bashing propaganda. And it doesn't make any sense, because we know that non-governmental organizations, including many funded by George Soros, have been stimulating the refugees to go to Europe. We know that these refugees are, in effect, war refugees. In fact, they are war refugees. They should use that word to be more honest. When they talk about the refugees coming into Europe, they're war refugees. They're refugees from the countries the United States is making war on. Putin's got nothing to do with it. Germany is threatening to scrap their open-door policy ahead of the next European Union-Turkey Refugee Crisis Summit. Germany is also offering to allow Turkey to join the EU a little sooner if Turkey will cooperate. It's amazing. Now then, over at the FBI, James Comey has had a bit of a bad day against Apple. You know, the federal judge has basically said, no, Apple's not under an obligation to help you break into the iPhone. And Comey, in a testimony before the committee Capitol Hill, yesterday was forced to admit the FBI's efforts to get Apple to create new software is not a one-off. They want a permanent tool that will allow them to break into people's iPhones. It's not confined to just this one iPhone from San Bernardino. And remember, the phone at issue was not a personal phone of the Patsies. It was a business-issued phone to which access was already supposed to be granted, because when your company gives you a phone, there's usually a little agreement you sign saying that the company is allowed to peek in and make sure that you're using your company phone only for company business, which makes perfect sense to me. I don't have a problem with that. Comey was forced to admit that the FBI messed up the phone in the first place by resetting the cloud storage setting connected to the phone. That made it harder to break in. In other words, the FBI screwed it up, and they're trying to pressure Apple to bail them out. Apple turned around and said to the FBI, did you really try and break into the phone in the first place? And they're saying, is it reasonable that after all these years of the government breaking into all of our devices that the FBI doesn't already know how to get in? And adding insult to injury, pouring salt in the wound, John McAfee, on a TV interview for Russia Today, demonstrated how the FBI could get into that phone and how easy it is to do. Unless you're with the FBI, in which case you're an idiot, which we knew from all the way back in August of 1941, when British double agent Dusko Popov, codenamed Tricycle, gave the FBI the complete Japanese plan for the attack on Pearl Harbor, and the FBI said this is nonsense and chucked it in the trash can. The FBI are not those wonderful guys that the TV shows and movies make them out to be. J. Edgar Hoover, when he was in charge of the FBI, he made it part of his mission to always control the portrayal of the agency in film and TV to show them as great, heroic, wonderful people. He was just absolutely obsessed with the Bureau's public image. Not with their private behavior, but with their public image. Let's see. Now then, there's a new book coming out about former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, which blows the whistle on the fact that Tony Blair was using classified intelligence while bidding on contracts for lucrative business deals around the world. The book is called Broken Vows. It's by Tom Bauer. It's going to be published later this month, and it is a reminder. People in government use the secrets looted from you for their personal gain. They've been caught at it time after time after time after time. We have a right to protect our business secrets from government spies who will not hesitate to use them for insider trading or profiting from our work. By the way, over in Chicago, their homicide rate has exploded this year. Worst it's been since the 1990s. This in a city that is held up as the model for gun control. Well done, Chicago. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We will be back tomorrow here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay informed, stay skeptical, make good choices. Share what you know with everybody that you know. We've got to get out there. This is our last chance to peacefully change the course of the nation. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.